Hi everybody, and welcome to 2020 and the first episode of the new decade of the Art of Procurement. I'm the host of Art of Procurement, Philip Eidson, and I'm going to start off the year by sharing my recent conversation with Remko Van Hoek. So Remko has enjoyed a really diverse career across supply chain and procurement to date. So on the consulting side, he's been a managing director at Corporate Executive Board and global procurement director at PwC. And then on the practitioner side, he's worked as a director of supply chain improvement at Nike. He's had 2 CPO roles in his native Netherlands, and then more recently, he was the SVP of Sourcing and Procurement at the Walt Disney Company. Well, Remko is now a clinical full professor of supply chain management at the University of Arkansas, and in late 2019, he co-authored a book titled Integrating Blockchain into Supply Chain Management, a Toolkit for Practical Application. So he and his 3 co-authors, they were looking to combine the understandable enthusiasm for distributed ledger technology with the knowledge that they have about emerging technologies in the past. So their goal was to provide actionable insights and some realistic use cases for blockchain. So in the conversation, Remko and I discussed the application of blockchain and how to separate that hype from the reality. Remko answers questions about use cases that he and his co-authors had the opportunity to study and what they learned from those leading companies that have started to dip the toe in the water of using the blockchain from a corporate perspective. We talked about the role of third-party advisors in blockchain pilots and implementations, and then how to increase the likelihood of success with a blockchain pilot project, including looking at the scope, partner selection, and setting internal expectations. All right, so we're going to go straight into the conversation, and I start by asking Remko if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
I used to go around saying I'm a supply chain person that ended up majoring in procurement, but increasingly, actually, I think of that as something that dates me because more and more students that I have the privilege of teaching, fairly early on in the semester, just, start getting so excited about how critical procurement is and is going to be for business in the future, for the supply chains that help make business possible and the societies in which they operate. So, that answer is rapidly becoming outdated. And I truly believe that procurement is just such a young field. We've just started scratching the surface of everything it can be. And that's the other reason why I'm excited to be back home in academia, because it gives me a chance to freely innovate and invent, work with a lot of companies, not just one, to help them drive progress and hopefully inspire, equip, and excite leaders of the future, which are so desperately needed in our field. So I gave you the somewhat dated answer, and hopefully you'll get more and more of the right answer to that question as you ask people in the near future. Yeah,
and so you mentioned there that you are back home in academia. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about kind of that career journey, because you've been, a multiple-time CPO. You've been in and around academia. How have you balanced those two, and why do you feel that academia feels more like home?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for every role that I've had. I've worked, in multiple countries, multiple industries, and in all of the org models that we can come up with for procurement organizations. And I haven't just done procurement; I've also been in supply chain roles, and I've greatly benefited and learned from all of those roles. I've had opportunities to meet and maybe even modestly help fantastic talent in our profession. So I'm very, very grateful for all of that. The reason why I'm very excited to be back home in academia is partially tied to what I just said. I love developing and supporting the development of talented professionals, and I love innovating. I think, talent development is a must for every leader, and innovation is a must for every supply chain and procurement person, because we just started scratching the surface of everything that we can be. And for me to be back home in academia, it gives me freedom to innovate without corporate strategy limitations, without budget limitations, without politics getting into the way. It gives me a chance to not just help the company that I happen to work for drive real progress, but help many, many companies. And where I am right now, we have a very healthy ecosystem of very engaged businesses that are very supply chain centric. And most importantly, I as a leader, you can always develop the people on your team, which is what you should be doing. Now that I teach both executive MBAs, executive ed, and our regular students, I can help so many more students of the profession in a single semester than I ever could,
right.
With any scope of any organization. Yeah. So, it's for me, it's a way to, serve more people, serve more the profession, and hopefully contribute a little bit more to our exciting field as a result.
So you said that you're teaching executive education. I think you've done that for a number of years, whether that's in Europe or in the States. So as you obviously come across a lot of executives who are in those programs, what are the biggest ahas that you keep on seeing that people are taking back into their day jobs?
Yeah, and I do a lot of consulting too, I should say. So that ties to the benefit of being able to not just help one company, but multiple colleagues and peers and friends and CFOs and companies. And I think what I love about our field is that, yes, we have so much innovation potential, but it's also a very concrete field. So I always set the bar for me in any client conversation or in any executive ed, session or in any seminar or workshop that I do, that I want people to be able to walk away with actionable takeaways that they can do something with. Yeah. And then preferably in two categories, something for tomorrow and something for, 3 months from now, kind of a thing. And I think if we can hit that, then you do well in terms of ROI. And that's like often and like that's actually, I can do something right now, or we've mapped out a path to make some demonstrable progress and drive some ROI. And that's, I love that moment. And it's, to be honest with you, it's not hard in our field. Even some of the toughest topics where we know the least, we can get very concrete. We can do something tomorrow, and we can work towards doing something even bigger, like 3 months from now.
Mm-hmm. And is it that look on the future that has really got you interested in blockchain? I want to talk a little bit as we go in for context into the book that you co-authored recently called "Integrating Blockchain into Supply Chain Management." So what is it that piqued that interest in blockchain as a topic?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. To be honest with you, I was the last author to join the team. When I joined the Walton College of Business here at the University of Arkansas. The team was already working on it, and when I joined, they said, "Well, you have a lot of industry perspective and experience. So you want to maybe have a look at this and see if you want to help us out." And that's something very typical to happen here at the Walton College. There's just a lot of innovative and exciting efforts going on, and blockchain is just one of those. To be honest with you, it was a newer topic for me, and I got excited because all of my friends and peers and colleagues that I started talking to in the business world, gave me that same response. Like, well, I hear there's something exciting about it. There's definitely a lot of noise in the system, but what is it? And how are we going to do anything with this? And that ended up actually being the majority of the focus of the book. Like, right. How to approach this, and how to take some of the hype out, how to demystify a little bit and make it real in a supply chain context. And that's what we ended up finding, is that this is not, reliving the heyday of RFID when we were going around saying this is going to solve all of your technology problems overnight and it's going to solve world hunger on the back of it. In a month we'll be done. I'm exaggerating, but that was part of how we initially thought about RFID. And there's some similar conversation about blockchain still today. Clearly that's not going to be the case. And so I think where we make a modest contribution is, helping think through much more diligently what a use case could be. There are several potential high potential use cases in the supply chain domain, but the key is you need to be very targeted and specific. And then it's not all that hard to make a start, but don't approach this as something that you need to put everything like hit the nuclear button on everything else at all.
Do you think that hype is getting in the way of the potential of blockchain at the moment? Because, we see it goes through the infamous hype cycle where for the last year or two, we've seen so much out there and not that many use cases actually emerge or let's say emerge at a commercial level that everybody knows about. I'm sure there's a lot of things that are going on that people don't necessarily want to talk about because they see that as their competitive advantage. But that hype kind of gets in the way of what the potential is.
Yeah, so I think there is a positive thing in it, and so what I tend to do with companies that ask me about this, I show some of the benchmark data that we've collected to show what are the areas that people are focusing on and what's the degree, and I share that to kind of help sort of take some of the hype out and say, let's level set for a moment where we really are. So don't feel like you are like the last one to join the bus at all. Yeah. Like let's level set a little bit where we really are. So I think that's a helpful aspect, number one. But why there is some benefit to the hype is that there is a lot of questions being asked by our executives about, isn't there something about, shouldn't we be doing something about this? And I actually think there is a bit of a positive in there that, one of our pieces of advice is figure out a narrow scope and a narrow set of partners to just try out a use case, do a pilot, learn a little bit. It is not hard to make the case for starting a pilot or exploring a use case because of the hype that there is. So obviously we'll need to not start promising the solution to all of our supply chain problems overnight. But it is positive that it's not hard to make the case for, making a modest start and beginning to learn. So something good about the hype there.
Yeah. So as you start to look into use cases, and not necessarily expecting you to rattle off, 20 different use cases for blockchain, what are some of the areas that you see that are attracting most interest?
Yeah, you're asking the right question. Right? The question is, what is the use case? And the build on that would be make sure it's tight and narrow, and make sure that it's adaptable, because as you pilot, yes, you might develop proof of concept, but you might also need to adapt a little bit. So, those are some pieces of advice probably from the companies that we work with surrounding use case. Use cases that I'm excited about include a lot, sort of around visibility and transparency. And so the ability to move from traditional information flow in the supply chain, which was, sequential with fragmented information and partial visibility, like one tier up and one tier down at best. And our ERP focus was entirely internally, so not even, necessarily externally. So obviously that, led to bullwhip effect and all sorts of other well-known supply chain problems. What blockchain has the potential of doing is to give instant information to the entire chain immediately. So it is the distributed nature of the information that is full and complete and not sequential that holds a lot of potential when you are in supply chains that are time sensitive. Right? Obviously, if the way I just brought blockchain down to basically a distributed database, you don't need a new database for every supply chain segment at all. But the ones where there is clear time sensitivity, and when there is a consumer value from better information, you could hugely benefit in it. So, the new UPS application just came out where they're tracking beef from the US to Japan, and where they're able to also make that data visible to the consumer, considering ordering beef off the menu. And that's a level of visibility that we haven't had all that widely. And it's a use case that ends up being very consumer centric. We also saw another use case in our research about making shelf level product specific information available about energy and water consumption in the production, distribution, storing, and delivery of a product. And making that available to consumers was driven by consumers increasingly value that level of visibility, and it is beginning to impact their shelf level buying decisions. And so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and so the blockchain itself then brings the trust to that data. Is that right? So because that data cannot be changed as something goes through the supply chain, for example, it's not like that can be manipulated by any third parties to show the data in the way they want it to be shown.
Yeah, so yes and no, right?
Okay.
The pure technical answer is it is hard to manipulate. Mm-hmm. It's near impossible, but it's not impossible. The only reason why it's near impossible is that because it is instantly distributed, it means that if you want to change a record, you need to do that on all of the nodes. Yeah. And information can be added onto the nodes, which then makes it even harder to trace it back. So yes, it has cybersecurity benefits too. Absolutely agree. It's not perfect, but it is a step up. The thing about trust, though, is that what's a catch here is that there's still no excuse for good data management. Mm-hmm. Because if I have an upstream party, for example, enter wrong data on the blockchain, then what the blockchain gives me is better and instant visibility into wrong data.
Yeah.
Right. So there's still no excuse on the need to do good data management. And actually, maybe even more so because this is so distributed. So it raises the bar on everybody that has access to it.
So does that require an investment in your own, the cleanliness of your own data and data management and data governance before you even start to think about blockchain pilots? Because you don't want to compound bad data. I'm understanding that in the right way.
You could, but it's not necessarily for the pilot.
Okay.
I think you need to make sure that if you're seeking proof of concept, that you set up a protocol and approach that ensures that good data gets entered into the pilot environment. So not necessarily at the start, but once you start thinking beyond pilot about scaling it to more parties and greater parts of the supply chain, then you do have a little bit of work to do to make sure that all stick to the protocol and that we keep it clean over time too. So it's not necessarily upfront homework. That's part of why it is easier to start with blockchain in a pilot and proof of concept environment than perhaps with some other technologies. Mm-hmm. And there's some other reasons for that too, but.
What are I'd like to dig deeper a little bit into pilots. Are there best practices that a procurement leader, supply chain leader who's listening to the pod today can think about in terms of where do I even start? What's a good area of my business? How small should a pilot be? I want to try and do something, an experiment, but I don't really know what actions I should be taking.
Yeah, the what part of the supply chain I would defer to some of our benchmark material in the book and beyond. Mm-hmm. Happy to have a conversation with anybody because we're seeing quite widespread in terms of where in the supply chain, and we've got some good examples of that. But what I think the recommendation around how to scope it would be based upon the companies, the pioneers in this field that we had the privilege of working with. Yeah. The advice would probably be try and scope it specifically, narrowly, and very, very targeted. If you can find, say, 2 to 4 supply chain partners that are interested in piloting with you, that is more than enough to get to proof of concept. Right. You do not need to get all 500 parties in a particular flow of goods on the chain at all to get the proof of concept. In fact, that might make it really hard. We were talking to one company where actually they had to tweak the pilot scope because one of the targeted partners wasn't ready to start doing this yet, and so they tweaked it. didn't stop them from figuring out that there is proof of concept and that this might work out. So that will probably be our advice. One more catch there is that if it happens to be a successful pilot, there's a risk of beginning to drink from the Kool-Aid a little bit, to use a good Americanism. And so one of the case companies that we work with said, make sure that you do stop to learn once you've done that pilot, and don't just race onto the next one, because then you actually miss potentially quite a bit of the learning benefits that are there to be had. So easy to start, doesn't take a lot, but don't go too fast beyond your initial endeavor, and do stop to learn.
Are there certain characteristics of a supply chain partner who would be well positioned to work with on a pilot or a proof of concept? You talked about not everybody in your supply chain will even have the capability essentially to work with you on a pilot. So what do you look for in those that do have that are suitable and appropriate to work with?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a prescriptive answer there, but I guess I'm give you a different version of the same answer, and probably soon I'll start beginning to bore you with it. But it's if you can find partners that are willing to keep the scope narrow and to keep it small initially, and then you're setting yourself up well. And the other thing is, just don't target 10, but target 2 to 4, and start there.
So in pulling the pilot together then, do you need a third party to help you do this? Or are you seeing where, organizations who maybe are starting to investigate blockchain are doing that within their own resources, with their own partner? What do you typically see? How many people do you need to get involved to get a pilot off the ground?
Well, there's clearly a lot of consultants, technology providers, solution providers out there that are, co-investing with clients to go through pilots. So there's a potential benefit of working with a partner, but. And that can help in terms of bringing some additional resourcing increasingly also experience as more and more, experience is developed about how to do this and how to do this well. But that's in and of itself is not a must, obviously.
Right.
So you can go either way from my point of view.
Okay.
We do, and I will also say that there is, in addition to working with solution providers and consultants, we at Walton, my colleagues started a blockchain center of excellence, which actually brings multiple companies together to guide some of the research and to do like hackathons and all that sort of stuff. So there's also a real opportunity to learn from peers in this space. And what's been exciting is that I've actually seen quite a bit of willingness to share and to help others.
All right, well, Remko, first of all, I want to thank you so much for sharing some of your insights in blockchain. I think it's one of those topics that as the hype starts to die down a little bit, it actually becomes clearer where the opportunities are to make some real impact and to start working in areas that will be one, interesting to beneficial for those companies who want to start investing in figuring out what blockchain means to them and how they can take advantage of it. So I want to kind of wrap up by just asking, if anybody is interested in this topic. I'm sure there's a lot of folks who are listening who maybe they work in an organization where they're really passionate about blockchain or understanding blockchain, and maybe their peers around them aren't. If people are interested in checking out the book, where's the best places for them to connect with you and to engage with you?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. I mean, you hit exactly on what the purpose of the whole effort to write this book was, to provide some input to practical implementation considerations and to demystify and both give practical pointers. So thank you for landing on that. Obviously, the book's now out and available. Yeah. But beyond that, this is a fast-moving field, and we're nowhere near done with our efforts to research pioneers, learn from pioneers, as well as help many others that are looking into this. So if you're interested beyond the book to learn more and to stay involved and to benefit from everything, refining our benchmarks and our cases and companies that we're helping get started, just, connect, drop me a note. Glad to help more and to serve many more. Thanks for the opportunity to join today.
No, what I will do is I will make sure that I include a link to your LinkedIn profile as a way for people to reach out to you directly. And also the link to the book, which is, again, Integrating Blockchain into Supply Chain Management, a toolkit for practical implementation. I'm going to put the link to for folks who can go and buy that as well. Those are all going to be in the show notes for today's episode. I'm not quite sure yet what the episode number is going to be, so the best way to find the show notes is just to go to artofprocurement.com/podcast. There's a search button on that page. Just search for Remko, Remko, and this episode will be sure to come up. So, Remko, I just want to thank you one last time for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Hi there, I want to thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. You can check out all of our back catalogue at artofprocurement.com/podcast, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's show, I'd love if you would tell a peer, or perhaps go and rate and review by going to artofprocurement.com/review. Word of mouth really is the best way to help the podcast grow, and if you're able to do either one of those things, I would truly appreciate it.